Welcome to Brandon Hall Group's Excellence at Work podcast. You will hear from industry leaders covering innovative, cutting-edge business, learning, and HR topics that weave current market research and technology into each episode. Our Excellence at Work podcast is hosted by Brandon Hall Group's Chief Operating Officer and Principal HCM Analyst, Rachel Cooke.
Hi, this is Rachel Cooke, and with me today I have Lori Mazan, the co-founder and president and chief coaching officer from Sounding Board. Welcome with us, Lori.
Hi, Rachel. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And we were just chatting about the last time that we were together was last year around June timeframe when you spoke at our DEI Excellence Conference. You talked about personalized coaching for women leaders, strategies for success. And it was great to have you then. And I'm excited to chat with you today as you just recently launched a book I believe the name of your book is called The Future of Developing Dynamic Leaders, and why is it's really about a revolution for leadership development. And so I can't wait to learn more about or share with you and our listeners today more about your framework and your the drivers for developing this book. And, you know, it's certainly needed now more than ever. The need for good leaders, the need for inclusive leadership, and, all of the changes that are happening in our world around us. So our leaders have to be equipped to be able to empower and to influence and to lead successfully in this interesting time frame.
Yes, that's actually is the title of The Future of Developing Dynamic Leaders. And the idea is exactly what you're saying. The work environment, the external environment has changed so much over the last, say, 5 years, maybe up to 10 years. And it's so dynamic and ever changing unless organizational leaders are developed in a way that let them adapt to all those unpredictable things that are happening. Really, they're not going to be very successful, and therefore the organization won't be very successful. And I wrote the book because I've been a 25-year executive coach, and I've seen what organization and the external environment, the work environment has changed so dramatically. And yet the way companies develop leaders has not changed barely at all. And in fact, I've been a little bit alarmed because organizations have been doubling down on a kind of skill-based learning model, which is one of the oldest development models that started way back in 1970 and really has been shown over and over again to only have about a 10%, impact in development and a very, very low transfer of learning from a skill-based program to actual daily work. And yet I just continually hear people talking about upskilling, reskilling, and there is value to all of that. It's just that we're baseline value. Just skill-based training by itself is not going to create leaders who can be exceptional in an unpredictable, ever-changing environment that we're currently dealing with.
You talk a lot about skill-based and upskilling, and you are right. We see that as, especially over the last couple of years with the pandemic and having to switch people from different jobs into different functions. And so I think that was a quick fix to get them ready, or to be able to kind of maneuver them or rotate them without having to hire new people, or to try to retain their talent but give them the ability to cascade across the organization. However, just focus on skills, and we see that in our research, is not enough. There's so much beyond that, and you talk about that too, about making sure the contextual component, and that you're really focused on the leader, the individualized needs of that leader, and
Right.
what kind of development do they need. And coaching's a big thing too. I see that that is critical, and we've also see that. But in our research, not enough companies are providing coaching as one of the. They are, but not as deep as they can or need
Yeah, not
to.
at the level they could. So exactly right.
Right.
And that was actually why we started Sounding Board, because look, the highest level leaders in organizations have been doing coaching for about 20 years. It started really as a profession, as an industry in the early 90s, and it became big in the 2000s. And the thing that was unfortunate is it was behind closed doors kind of thing. Like the very
Mm-hmm.
first well-known coach talked about how coaching was for derailed executives and will derailed, and so they didn't want anyone to know that coach. So in the early days, it was like a very much a secret weapon. I would coach these, and I mean CEOs, C-suite folks of Fortune 100 companies, and they would be hiding that they had a coach. And yet they knew it was incredibly impactful for them and took them from, good to exceptional leaders. And it's only been really in the last 10 years or so that folks have realized that coaching can be used from a developmental perspective. It's not remedial. And so we do know people are using it. We actually started
Mm-hmm.
Sounding Board to try to expand coaching usage for all leaders in the organization. And one reason is those folks that I coached in the early years always said, wow, I wish I had this earlier in my career. Why did I only get this when I'm already at the top of the house? I was like, yeah, that's actually a really good question.
That is a good question. And also, well, two things. I think now with coaching and the ability to deliver it in different ways through technology makes it more accessible and affordable
Yes.
for,
Mm-hmm.
not just executive level leaders, but to many. And then also, if you think about how coaching is used for an athlete or for a talent, professional, a movie star, the amount of effort and coaches and lessons that go into becoming excellent at their profession, it's years of training, years and years and years of training. But in the workplace, it does not necessarily, you don't get that type of coaching or training or
No,
support
no
necessarily.
exceptional athlete would think of being able to do it without a coach. So you're exactly
Hmm.
right. Why would a leader think they could be exceptional without that?
Yeah, and it just, I'm trying to remember who shared this story with me, but it kind of stuck with me. If you think about training for the Olympics, or if you're training for a game, you put hours and hours and hours, and you go out there on, we have sons that are baseball players, our daughters, and a little bit of everything right now. But you have a game that lasts, you might just be playing in that game for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or depending on what it is. But yet a leader is doing their job. They're in the workplace more than they are than in their personal lives. Yeah, they're not getting that level of training. And then you want to know why we have ineffective leaders, or we have low performance in
Right.
companies, or you have, all these issues, HR issues. And so I don't know. It's
Exactly.
really,
As a leader, you're like always on. Anytime it's in the work environment, which is, a lot of hours a day. As a leader, you're always on. As an athlete, the buzzer rings and you're off, right? It's time limited. But for a leader, it's not time limited. It doesn't matter. Things happen, and if someone's calling you in the middle of the night, and you have to deal with these stories with coaching an executive, and in the middle of the night US time there was a coup in the country where they operated, and he called me like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And it's not like I know what to do if there's a coup in another country, but it gives that leader a thinking partner, right? To talk through what the options are and come up with a plan. And so we talked for like 15 minutes. He came up with a plan and then he went to do it. It was 4 a.m. on the East Coast, but that's when it's happening. So as a leader, you're always on. It's actually, it's so much more impactful and stressful and um, than an athlete, where at the end of the game you get to just relax and be done, and you kind of know if you won or lost. As a leader, you don't really know if you won or lost until pretty far down the road there.
What are some of the things in using coaching and an effective development model? What are the things that we need to really think about, whether you're an HR professional or you're a leader yourself?
One reason I am really a fan of coaching is it allows leaders to develop capacities and capabilities beyond just skills. So finding ways to blend skills that fit personally for that individual, so it's authentic and yet is contextually and environmentally driven. It's really impossible to do that in any kind of training situation. I started my career as a front of the room trainer. And after training people on all kinds of skills, they would always ask the same question, which is like how I actually use this in my daily life. And the value of coaching is daily life is the fodder for the coaching conversation. So everything you're doing is about how to handle the things that are coming up in your daily life as a leader, how to do that in your own style, in the context of your company, in the context of the work that you're doing. So it's very suited to the outcome that you're looking for. And one of the things that's changed really dramatically since the last century is there was a very strong feeling that to be a good leader, you had to have like 3 or 5 certain traits. And those traits were really very male oriented traits.
Sure.
Because at that time, that was who was in leadership. No fault here, but like first 10 years of my career, I only coached men because only men were in the C-suite. There weren't any women. And so those models of leadership no longer hold true. And what does work is blending these sets of skills, capabilities, and capacities with who you are as an individual. So it stays consistent over time. You're not just putting on as a suit of clothes that don't fit you and then trying to tailor them. You're actually, buying the things that suit your style up front and figure out how to make those work in your environment. And that lets your behavior stick over time. The other way where it's rote practice under stress, human nature, we just go back to our natural. We can't maintain those practices. That's why people sign up for the gym in January and in March, no one's in the gym because it's just a rote learning thing unless it's really embedded in how you think. So it's changing your thinking to change your behavior. And that's not something you can do without help from the outside. It's very difficult, let's say, to do it. So coaching just has so many benefits for leader development. And yet, as you said, our organizations, one, don't use it. It's time consuming to set it up. It can be expensive. And that's the whole point of a company like Sounding Board, where we have a software platform where you can manage your own internal coaching, or you can blend with external coaches from Sounding Board, or even third-party coaches. So you have can create a complete leader development program on the same platform. Makes it super easy.
So you have within your platform or your solution, you have both sounding board coaches, and then you also have a network of coaches that are certified and that will match to the leader or person.
Yeah, but we also have a software that lets an organization manage internal coaches. Let's say a company
Sure.
wants to reduce their costs even more. They can train up folks in there, employees current leaders to coach, and you say up and coming leaders, and they can manage all of those. And if they have, sometimes companies have specific folks they like for the top of the house, you can still manage those folks on our platform as well. So you have a really comprehensive solution depending on how you want to use it. And a lot of options there. Is very customizable. One thing we were very intentional about is we don't profess a leadership approach. All of our software is customizable and all our coaching is customizable so that it is blended with the leadership approach of the organization. And the reason is one of my number one reasons for people coming to me for coaching was leaders who changed companies and therefore changed cultures and really struggled to adapt to a different culture. And organizations have both, their employee culture, their organizational culture, and their leadership culture. And we are not trying to change that. We are trying to be an extension of that so that each organization is able to highlight the way they work and have our solutions just blend right in.
And how important are assessments in development or promoting,
So I have kind of a strong view on assessments. And I would say people are kind of on one or the other side of that issue. So assessments, again, almost all the assessment companies started in the last century. And some of them have upgraded. So I would say if you really like assessments, make sure you get something more upgraded, because the ones from the last century still have that old model of leadership that's pretty male dominated. And you want something that's more current. But the reason I don't like assessments is they are point in time. So if I'm an employee and I had a poor conversation with my manager yesterday, and today I'm filling out an assessment on them, I'm not going to be very happy. And so it's not really, there's a frequency bias that's often in there, a recency bias. And at this point in time, it's really not that valuable. In the early days, all of this was on paper, and I used to do these assessment debriefs, and it'd be so much information. We just try to narrow it down to like 2 or 3 items they could work on. And I came in a notebook, and that notebook would be on the shelf the next time I came to that person's office. Like, they were not using it. So I feel like a small assessment and then some work to help the coachee understand how they're going to impact in their current environment is more useful. So we do a small assessment that's a self-assessment. We have a manager assessment. We have manager alignment meeting so that the manager can weigh in on the development that the person is working on. But it's more real time than it is a point in time assessment. And I think the whole industry is going that way. We're going like employee performance. So I do once a year. That's really not been that valuable. I think most people hate it. It doesn't have the impact people want. And so people have been trying some new models, which is a more continuous assessment or quarterly performance. And we have some ideas about how to do that really differently. So it's more around alignment than performance. But I think all of those old school approaches need to be upgraded to match with the current environment. If you're doing a static assessment and your environment's changing on an hourly, daily basis, it's really not going to help you very much.
Right. And you are right. I've taken a number of and reviewed a number of different assessments, and I'm not going to tell any of them out necessarily, but some of them are it's interesting and fascinating. However, the level of granularity and how deep you go is great to an extent, but then what do you do with it?
Right.
It's like, okay, I learned all about this. I learned how I react in a certain environment and how I need to, also manage, whether if you're managing up or managing down, how you should communicate across, which is important, but I do think simplifying it now more than ever is important so that you can focus, because you can't change everything all at once. And I think I remember being in a 360, well, this way 15 years ago, and our leader then just had like a meltdown because he could not accept what was the information that was coming back to him. And it was interesting, but I don't know. It just wasn't, I don't know. I don't think it helped him at all. And
Well,
also the experience was not a good way for us to perceive um how he felt in that time frame. So
yes.
it just made us, validate, the feedback that was shared. So it's interesting. I think that, I think it's real important for leaders to be able to reflect and to um, understand and empathize how they come across the perception, but to try to change everything all at once and to dive too deep in an assessment, it can be counterproductive from what we see.
Yeah,
And
in
then,
those debriefs I used to do, the first hour was always trying to just talk them down off of their reaction. Because
mhm,
you got an assessment feedback that was like exceptional, no one did. So that I
mhm,
always had to help people work through their reactions and try to get to something useful. And without that coach debriefing, they wouldn't get to that. The other thing is your point about perception. Assessments are about the perception of others. And
mhm,
it's really hard to change other people's perceptions, even though as a leader, managing perceptions is one of your top things you need to do. But to do that, you have to examine your own thinking that leads to the behavior that creates the perception. And without being able to delve into your own thinking around that, your belief system, your patterns, where that's all coming from for you, no big change is going to happen. So the coaching gets below the surface of this is how others perceive you, to how are you thinking about this, and what's the impact you are wanting to have, and how do you have that impact. So it's a very
mhm.
different frame of reference that is much more non-judgmental and starts where that individual leader is and then brings them to the next level of thinking. So in my mind, that's why it's so successful versus an assessment that, again, just like skill training, how much actually changes in their daily work life? Very, very minimal change.
We had another speaker last year from UBS, and the first thing he spoke about was how everyone's focused on skills and it's not about skills. And we've had a lot, we had some leaders in McKinsey and Consulting on our stage,
Yeah.
and Accenture, and we ourselves, Brain Hall Group has certification programs around competencies, and yes, they are important. However, it's that leadership mindset is in their ability to change and to adapt is greater than skills. You can teach skills, but you can't teach a mindset. And and I and again, I think that is more done through coaching and evaluating the culture fit for that leader and that organization. So I think that's a
Right.
really important mindset or consideration. And
Yeah, you have to, I mean, it's so basic in a way. If exceptional leaders were created with skill training, we would already have everybody being an exceptional leader. So we
sure.
know that that's not it. So there is something else. And it is, as you say, it really is mindset. It's changing your thinking. So that's why I always talk about coaching as being a thinking partner for the leader. because helping them let go of old ways of thinking and embrace new ways of thinking and then match behavior to that new way of thinking.
I couldn't agree more. And I have another question for you around the generations in the workforce. We were having an internal discussion this week as we are kind of thinking of our theme for next year, around what we focus is around excellence and helping people in the workplace perform better, and focused on excellence and the future work, being ready and adapting to the future work. And there's obviously a lot of focused on generative AI, and we've had a lot of, we're doing a lot of research and discussion topics on this. And it was interesting. I just did not hear a whole lot about the generational issues or gaps as maybe last year,
Mhm.
before generative AI started to kind of burst out everywhere. Not that AI has not been around, but to the extent with ChatGPT and now thousands of tools to support using it. So, what is your, with generational or multi generations in the workplace? What we're seeing, well, one, you have younger generations or younger people that are becoming leaders sooner because of the talent gap
Yeah.
and just their access, in an organization or to leaders is different. So they are exposed, I think, earlier on in their careers than, and again, it will vary based on organization, the managers that they have, the culture. But I think there's a lot of variables that one, we need managers and leaders, and we have a shortage. And two, I think we have this younger generation that are being put into these positions by necessity, by opportunity, by access. So, what is the opportunity to equip them with coaching or with these types of
Mhm.
solutions? And are you seeing an uptake in that?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's been very impactful for leader development is the change in the length of tenure of leaders and employees in an organization. So, an example is when I started, large corporations really hired folks right out of their schooling and kept them to retirement. And there was about a 20-year trajectory of leader development. So you could really have that planned out over time. Now, the average tenure of an employee at an organization is around 3 years. So you have,
I would
and
not
maybe
say
a
it five,
leader,
correct?
yeah, maybe leader 4 or 5, maybe, yeah. So you only have a quarter of the length of time to develop these leaders. So not only are there not enough of them, having gone around and talked to lots of people now, most learning and development professionals and C-suiters say that their leaders are not prepared for the job. One of the reasons why not, they just haven't had enough time, and we're still using the first part of that leader development path, the skill development. That was only stage one of the 20-year trajectory. But now, because that was the first 5 years, that's all we're doing. So leaders are not ready to lead, and especially in the volatile environment there that we're in. McKinsey had an interesting survey that said executives, only 11% of them believe their leadership development programs are successful. And why is that? We're only getting to part one. We're never getting to part two and three because we just don't have enough time. So that means really reinventing leader development to fit into that time frame. And then you add the generational differences in there. There's around 5 generations in the workforce right now, and they all think very differently. And you started this with talking about AI. I do think that's going to be super impactful for organizations. And I do think there's going to be a lot of skill training needed around that. But from a leadership perspective, that approach doesn't get below the surface. The nice thing is it can show patterns, which is great, but how do those patterns get in place, and how do you change your thinking to change those patterns? I don't think AI is really going to help with that. So I think what's going to be useful really is a blend of human interaction and AI tools that kind of actually, you get 1+1=3 that way. I don't think in terms of leadership development, Gen AI is going to be able to do it on its own. It may be able to speed up some of the basic stuff in skill development so that leaders can get faster to the capability and capacity and rethinking part of the developmental path.
Right. I think it'll continue. You can personalize it to an extent, but you still need that human component. And you don't want to just talk to a computer or a bot. You do want to, sometimes it's okay. And we'll probably have a mini
Yeah,
robot next
it's
to
interesting
next
because
year.
that is useful. Yeah, it is useful in some venues. So I was
Mhm.
prior to Sounding Board, I was in a startup that was VR driven. And the Defense
Okay.
Department have been using basically a bot to help vets with PTSD. And they found that for very traumatic events, it was easier for that person to tell the story to a non-human because they weren't getting the reaction. So there's uses for it. That's not so useful in leader development because actually you talked about perception management being key. Without any reaction coming back, you don't know how you're coming across. And leadership is about how you're presenting to others. It's not just about feeling internal things for yourself. So I think you're going to need a human being to help vet and validate your thinking and how that shows up to others, not just you individually.
I think so too, and I hope so. Otherwise, I don't know what we're
Yeah,
all going to do one day.
yeah, exactly. It's not going to be very fun, I don't think.
No, but I again, if you look at the trends over, one decade to another, even with e-learning and a lot of training that has been converted from the classroom to virtual learning, there's it's good, but not good enough. You still need to blend it with a real live person. So I
That's
think
right.
with generative AI, it's just going to help that person or that team, um, you know, develop the content or customize the content and be able to present and have information quicker and better to you, and in different types of modalities that and
Mm-hmm,
design. And
mm-hmm.
so I think it's going to open up, and it has opened up a lot of different opportunities for developing and delivering content and presenting than in previous years, and it will continue to improve.
Yeah, I like the AI. I like the kind of it you write out, and they'll write it again for you, and it's still your ideas, but it maybe is just written a little differently. And sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's not. So then you just choose if you want to use your own original or the enhanced version. I think that's a really nice model for it. I notice a human
Yeah,
being
I don't
has
know.
to put the original content in there, so it's the same old technological issue, which is garbage in, garbage out. And training
True.
those models, depends on what data you're putting in there to train those models. And I already can see some of that's going to be a problem. If you're putting in data for individual contributors and then you're trying to train senior leaders on that, it's not going to work. So it's going to be challenging to be able to create the sophisticated leaders need as they're advancing in an organization, because there just isn't going to be a lot of information to train folks on there. It gets more and more personalized, more and more information. So I think that's AI is going to be helpful at the lowest levels. It's not going to be very helpful as you go.
Well, Lori, this has been a great talk. I really enjoyed catching up with you and reconnecting since last year. I'm glad to see how you're continuing to persevere and provide great coaching to your clients and some of our clients that we share. And so it's great having you. Is there anything that you want to wrap up with, or anything that you maybe perhaps didn't touch on?
Okay. Well, pleasure chatting with you too. Really have enjoyed our partnership over the years. And I would just say, for one of the things that's very interesting about the book is I wrote it really from more than one perspective. So if you're learning and development professional, or somebody really concerned with the development of leaders in your organization, you can read the book from that perspective and really start to identify tools and approaches that you should let go of, and new ones that you would think of adding and developing in terms of your development programs. And the book was also designed to give you kind of an experience of coaching. So it has 12 chapters, and they're designed like 12 sessions in a coaching engagement. So when you're an individual leader, you can work through the book yourself independently and start to develop yourself and your thinking as leader. And each chapter has some questions at the end to help you do that. Whether you're a leader development professional or a leader yourself, those questions can help you forward your thinking. So take a look at the book. I've heard people found it very usable and very conversational, and I hope you enjoy it.
And can we share with our listeners a link where they can purchase or go find it?
Oh, sure. You can go to the Sounding Board website, www.soundingboardinc.com, and you'll see the book on there. And you can also purchase it on Amazon or any of the online bookstores. Leadership Revolution, The Future of Developing Dynamic Leaders by Lori Mazan. That's me.
Well, thank you, Lori. And I agree. Everyone should go ahead and get a book, and I'm going to as well. So I'm excited to read more. I had the opportunity to take a look at some of the summaries, but I want to dive deeper. And I think it's a lot of great information. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. And we look forward to our next chat.